Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I like. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Castle and Blindspot. So in this episode of Castle, we have a actor known as Zane being killed. I guess in a very play/poetic way. He was stabbed in the neck with what looked like a quill. I don't know if that's necessarily what that was or what that was supposed to be, but that's what it looked like to me. I kind of thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't like the way the sounds were going off at the beginning of the episode. I was like, did someone put that in a bow and arrow and is going to shoot it at him? It's like, no, they just went up and, he came into the shadows, like he stepped up and just stabbed him in the neck with it. I love the kind of twists and turns when you end up finding out, like, because at the beginning you have it where it's kind of like, you end up finding, they end up going to like a private room that he is, currently staying in, go in there, we found a redhead in his bed. I kept wondering, I was like, the way that they seen this, I was like, we're gonna find someone in his bed. Who's it gonna be in his bed? I was like, is it gonna be Alexis in his bed? That's gonna be weird and awkward. Ended up pulling it back. It's actually Martha, which that got me, was like, holy crap, wasn't expecting it. He's like, and Castle's like, mother? And so it turns, I love the fact is he's like, Martha's kind of like, oh, we were having one of our sessions, and Javier was kind of like, oh, so that's what they call it now. He's like, stop it. It's just like, that's not funny. When you're session, were you sleeping with him? She's like, oh, God knows, Castle. She's like, Richard, calm down. Don't think like that. She's like, basically, she was his acting coach, because basically he's an actor who's known to kind of be a crappy actor, and he was kind of being, he kind of got signed, he signed up for being playing a part in Hamilton. And very interesting things where you end up finding out that he is actually, one of the reasons why he was killed is because he's actually connected to a well-known drug boss, like a big cartel boss. He had gotten in connection with them, and you end up finding out what that connection is after Castle ended up getting kidnapped, which is very interesting. Castle ended up meeting the boss and ended up finding out that the actor went to him because he wanted, to kind of become a more well-known actor. And essentially, he was kind of like wanting to play this specific cartel boss in a biopic. But the cartel boss turned him down because he's like, yeah, that guy sucks as an actor. I want a better actor to play me, portray me in a movie. And so he was essentially like, okay, if you want, he's that same, Zane came to him again. So he was like, okay, if you want to I want you to prove to me that you're a good actor. So do this Hamilton play. And if you get good enough reviews, then I'll let you play me in the biopic. And it's just like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's very interesting you have a drug cartel guy being like, I'm very particular about who plays me in the movies, because it's like, I don't want some amateur actor, playing me. It has to be someone of top class and, good acting skills, because it's like, especially because Zane wanted to do it so he knew if he did it and did a good enough job, he could get like a Grammy, was it like a nomination or win from it, so. But because he was so interested in it, because he knows about Castle, and he's just like, he became fascinated when he found out that Castle was on this particular case, and Castle being a writer, he's like, you know what you can do? You should write my story. He's like, you spend, maybe the next 6 or so months sitting here, writing the script for the movie. He's like, or I can send you back, back to the people you care about, in pieces. And to me, when Castle turned and looked at the bed and the typewriter, instantly I actually said it out loud. I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of Misery, the Stephen King story. Granted, I don't know how close Misery is to the book. You can get all anal about that. But it's like, based on my experience with the movie, which isn't much. I don't think I've ever seen the movie all the way through, but I know major plot points in the movie. So I instantly was like, oh yeah, Misery. But anyway, that was just something that kind of popped in my mind. I did love the fact is when he was kind of, him and Castle were kind of laughing and joking about it. I love it when Castle does those hard cuts, because it's like his mom being like, oh God, there's no telling what they're doing to it, what kind of torture he's going through. And it hard cuts to him and the cartel boss just laughing. And then Castle says something, and the cartel boss gets up and he kind of gets super pissed. He flips the table over, points the gun at Castle. Castle's flipping out, and then he starts laughing, because essentially Castle had compared him. He was like, "Oh, you're more like Richard III." He's like, "Yeah, but like at least I have a sense of humor. Richard III didn't." And then like the DEA showed up because everyone found out where Castle was, and essentially came to rescue him. Which sadly, like most of his men got killed, and before he could get down the trap door that was open for him, Castle tripped him and he got caught. And he looked at Castle like that. He's like, and one of the DEA guys was there, like, "Are you okay, Mr. Castle?" He's like, "Yeah, but not for long." I love how freaked out it was because it's like he's going to come after me now. It's like I got him captured. I tripped him. And it's just like it was just in that moment, and I was just like I tripped him, and he got caught. It's like I'm screwing Baker trying to make him feel better. It's like she's like, "No, it's okay. He was going to get caught anyway. You just kind of made it a little easier." But what you ended up finding out, many things, very interesting twist, is finding out the fact is that his brother was sleeping with his wife. You know, the cartel boss's brother was sleeping with his wife while he was on the run. Essentially, his brother wanted to take over his organization. That's like, man, that's kind of gotta suck as a cartel guy. It's like the moment your back is turning, the moment people think you're weak, even family turns on you just like that when they think they have an opportunity to rise up, you know, take over his enterprise, you know, take over the pleasures of pleasuring his wife. I don't know why I phrased it like that. I'm kind of tired and a little out of my mind at the moment, so maybe that's why. But nevertheless, it kind of seems like the brother was behind all of it because Zane was the only person that knew where his brother was. So, but it turns out it was the director lady, the redheaded lady, the woman that Ryan was kind of gushing over at the beginning of the episode. Essentially, the reason why he was able to get a part in Hamilton is because Zane basically promised her that when the biopic of that cartel guy would come up, she would be the director of it. But essentially, he got the go ahead from the cartel guy's brother to own. You know, he can write it, he can act in it and direct it. And so it's basically like, oh, I don't need her anymore. And then she was already pissed about that because she's like, as a woman, it's already hard to get into directing films. And then hearing him when he was trying to study and practice his lines, she was basically saying he was butchering Hamlet, and she just couldn't stand it, so she killed him. It was just kind of like the last straw. It was kind of like interesting that's what broke the camel's back, that him just being terrible. She's like, this SOB gets to act and direct the movie. He's such a hack. He's terrible. Forget it. I'm done. So, favorite parts of the episode, one being when Ryan was essentially taking over for his little girl's kindergarten play. He was basically kind of in charge of it. He was kind of telling one of the teachers, like, okay, we can do stuff specifically the teacher, like, oh, it could be done like this. I was thinking, like, he was kind of sharing his vision, like, oh, it could be done like this, this, and this. And the teacher was kind of halfway listening to him. It's just like, it's just, they're kindergartners. They're not serious actors. It's not like a serious play. Like, half of them probably won't. She's like, I'm worried about half of them even remembering how to sing the song because they're like 5 years old or whatever. And then Ryan's like, okay, then. And then he was kind of blunt, like, yeah, okay, then how about we talk about, okay, you want to talk like that? Let's talk about all your unpaid parking tickets or something like that. But Javier kind of like interjected. It's like, yo, Ryan, we got that thing to check out. It's like, wow, Ryan was about to abuse his power as a policeman to just take control over something as simple as like a play at a school. Eventually, Jenny pops up later in the episode, and she's kind of like, yeah, the parents kind of came together and decided, yeah, that you're out. You can't lead it anymore, just because he kind of went a little nuts with him. There was a cute moment later on in the episode when his daughter kind of brings it up. She's there in her little sunflower outfit, and she's like, is it, I can sing the song, and Kevin and Ryan's kind of like, no, you don't have to sing the song. You don't sing the song if you want to. And she's like, but if I don't sing the song, you'll be sad. And he's just kind of like, oh no, you know what? Let me help you out with it. And they sing it together. It was just like, it was the most, like, the cutest, most adorable thing ever. I'm just like, oh, it always hits me right there in the heart when I see cute stuff like that. And I also love the fact is that Beckett ended up forgetting about, because basically they talked about the fact is they alternate between date nights on like, oh, like I do it this week and next week you do something else. And basically she ends up talking about it later in the episode how like she always has to, it turns into a competition, like always having to one up the next person. But Castle's kind of like, that's kind of our, in a way, that's kind of our thing, always kind of outdoing one another, that keeps, the competition kind of spices up, not in his exact words, but it kind of like spices up the relationship. It keeps things interesting. because apparently he does all these very extravagant things. Because she even goes to Kevin to Ryan later on. I always keep calling him by his first name because I'm so used to calling most people by their last name, so it's kind of like it's weird when I slip and call them by their first name. But essentially went to Ryan about it, just like he's like, really, Mister who Castle, and list off what Castle did one time. He's like, I got no idea because she kind of totally forgot about it, but she kept pretending like she didn't, and I really like that. Because I love that about Castle and Beckett's relationship. She will never admit she's wrong to Castle because she knows his personality, that the moment she does, he will gloat about it, and he would never let her live it down. So, but they ended up having a nice dinner anyway. It turns out, I mean, a date night. They ended up just kind of relaxing. She was basically like, oh, having this amazing, after this day, you just kind of come home and you relax. I did love the fact that she joked about it earlier, like, yeah, and I know you're surprised about this date night I set up for you. He's like, so you set up for me to be kidnapped by a drug cartel guy? She's like, yeah, I know it's a crazy day, right? And then he kind of pieced it together. He was like, wait a minute, you forgot, didn't you? She's like, no, I didn't. I like that it took that moment for him to catch on. I'm like, you forgot, because every time, because there was a moment like he was about to, he's like, oh, she's like, I guess we're gonna have to cancel date night, and he's like, yeah, because he's like gonna go have dinner with his mom, and she's like, oh, you're the best, and then he basically responded like, oh, you're the best, oh no, but you're the best in every way, and walks away, and then she turns and she's just like, oh, she felt so bad because it's like he under the impression she had, dinner, a date night ready, but she didn't, so. I did like the very end of the episode where we find out basically the cartel guy ended up escaping from jail, and he had sent Castle like drafts of basically the first 2 acts of the movie and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, the best is kind of yet to come. And then Beckett got the call about him escaping prison, and Beckett's like, oh, what about date night? He's like, I'm sorry, I got to get started on this real quickly. So it's like, I wonder will we ever see, like, it's one of those things that's kind of, I do wonder, it's one of those like things that's just kind of a one-off thing that's kind of brought up one episode. You don't think it will ever be brought up again, but it might be. Like I said, the whole Nikki Heat thing, like, I'm so glad it came up this season, because I was recently wondering about it. For a while, it never crossed my mind, but more recently, I was like, what about the whole Nikki Heat thing? And literally, like, a week or two after me thinking like that, bam, it pops up in an episode about what happened to the whole Nikki Heat thing, about it being a movie series and whatnot, so. You never know, like, what little one-off things now might pop into something later on. Like, this whole storyline might come up later on, because they might end up crossing paths with that mobster later on, so. Now moving on to this week's episode of Blindspot. Essentially, there was a little girl found, we ended up finding out her name is Maya. She has, she does all these amazing drawings in her book, and one of said drawings turns out to be one of Jane's tattoos. It's actually the tattoo from a very prominent terrorist group, and it turns out that Maya is the daughter of the the daughter of the leader of the terrorist group. Like I said, I'm kind of tired, so I'm just kind of blinking out a little bit here. Sorry, I do apologize about that. But I thought it was kind of interesting that this is actually a very heavily Dr. Borden episode. We see him very little in episodes. This is like, I think, the most we've ever seen him in episode. But him and Maya kind of had a connection, as well as her and Jane. I thought that was kind of neat, because Jane, they had much in common. The fact is that they were in a place that they didn't really know, kind of left on their own. Not all they want to do is go back home. It is really sad when you find out later on what happened to her mom. Her mom ended up dying, being tortured, even had her tongue cut out and everything. It was a slow process. And the reason for that was, initially it was because it seemed like because she was talking to the reporter, but it turns out it's because of Maya's drawings, because she knows the faces of everyone that's, she can name a lot of people within the terrorist group, so that's why they wanted her taken care of. I knew that guy. I don't know what organization was. I'm guessing he was CIA, but a guy who wanted to take Maya away and was like super like against like the FBI looking after her. I thought that was kind of, I was like, the moment he started being like that and kind of giving those kind of looks, I was like, you're part of this, aren't you? Especially when he came to pick her up. He's like, oh, you guys done a terrible job. I'm going to take her away. Her grandma's away. I was like, you're a bad guy. And then it got quickly revealed he was. I was like, yeah, I can. It's always interesting when it's like, man, there's so much corruption around. That's what I'm saying. It sucks. Like, it's like, it makes you not want to trust any government connected group because it just makes you look at it, just be like, man, everywhere is corrupt. Especially in this show, it's like every time you turn around, somebody's corrupt. But thankfully, Maya was able to get back to her grandma at the end of the episode. Something I want to point out: Patterson was on fire this episode, dude. That was like she was pretty badass. She kind of handled herself pretty well. She took, pulling out the gun, taking guys down, running from gunfire like that, dude. It's incredible, especially considering I'm guessing after that last episode, the episode where she kind of went off her own, with that fake, the David inside of her mind, kind of like her consciousness constructing David. I guess after that, she kind of decided to kind of like, oh, I'm gonna be more well prepared because I don't know, because didn't know Patterson could handle herself like that because it seemed like that came out of nowhere. Not less in between, obviously we don't see it, but maybe in between episodes, she's been kind of like doing her thing. She even blew up the house, which was pretty neat because I was wondering like what she was doing. She was setting all that stuff up, but nothing happened with it. I'm like, okay, what's that? And she's on the roof burning her up. I was like, oh, it ended up blowing up the place. I do feel a little bad for Dr. Borden because it's like she kind of brings it up too, is the fact that she blew up his house. He's like, it's okay, I get to start from scratch here. And it's like, is it me or is there a little bit of a thing between them? Because it's like, it did make you wonder, it's like, why did Patterson decide to go out of anyone? Because it was like, because even Mayfair was like, why do you want to go? She's like, oh, I can. She kind of was stumbling and making excuses. It's like, why did you want to go? Did you want to go because of Dr. Borden? Because it seemed like they kind of have a thing going on, which I wouldn't be against. I mean, because even, the David inside of her mind was like, eventually you got to move on, even though you won't find anyone as like, as smart or as sexually gifted, essentially. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It seemed like they kind of had a little bit of a, I don't know. I shipped them hard together, Like they seem like they'd be cute because especially the way she was acting around him too, it seemed like that might be a thing. I don't think that's my imagination. I think that's him just kind of hitting it off. I thought it was pretty badass when he came up behind that guy when he was coming up with Patterson and you hear pop pop and it's like what did he do? No, freaking nail gun to the back of the guy's head. Granted, he was a little shaken by because he checked the guy's pulse, and probably never killed him. I mean, definitely never killed anyone before. Just like I said, this is probably like the roughest day for him. Just a lot of stuff went down. Guns pointed at him, having to kill a guy, protecting a little girl, having being used as a hostage when that CIA guy put the gun in the back of his head. I was just like, ooh. I was just kind of hoping, I was like, please don't like blow his brains out or something like that. But Maya opened the door and kind of like knocked him off balance. So Dr. Borden was able to get away. So. Other big things that happened this episode, we had Mayfair kind of casting aside her last, her significant other, burning like an old picture as well as other stuff that's connected to her. It looked like there was like maybe either like an anniversary card or a Valentine's Day card. She also burned with it, just kind of saying goodbye to the past. She ended up going on a date at the end of the episode, which I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. When she came back to that, when she was getting ice, I was like, yeah, she's about to get gunned down, isn't she? I was like, nope, she still hasn't gotten gunned down. I'm surprised. Like, okay, the moment you get in the room, your new girlfriend is going to, or the new lady in your life is going to shoot you, or someone's going to be there and shoot you. It's like, nope, she just walks in the room and her new girlfriend's throat is slit. So it's like, oh, I guess you weren't bad after all. I mean, I'm me. I'm always like, these type of shows always get me kind of suspicious of everyone. It's because it's like, she just randomly popped into Mayfair's life like that. To me, that whole situation at that bar just seemed like it was too convenient. So, it's like either, the way the situation looks, it's like, oh, she wasn't a suspicious person at all. She just legitimately like Mayfair, or she was in on it and she was just, things kind of didn't go the way they were expecting. It was just like that lady was expecting. She was thinking like, oh, I get close to Mayfair, I get some reward or something like that. But it's like to pay it off that like, okay, this is real. We have to kill you. And she was like, I'm not part of that plan. I don't like that plan, but they kill her anyway or something like that. Essentially, tell her to back away from Tom, looking into Tom. Essentially, they did the same thing as they did for Reed, except they just threatened Reed and Sarah. But I guess the main reason why they didn't really necessarily act upon it is because, her brother is Reed's boss, Kurt. So it's kind of like you going after Sarah means you're going to have to deal with Kurt. And it's like, I can only assume that this organization, the one that are doing this, is the same organization that Jane works for. So they don't need to cause problems with Kurt, because if they cause problems with Kurt, it's going to be a problem with Jane. So that's the way I interpret that. If that's the case, this could be a completely different group, but I feel like it's definitely them. And I won't lie to you, there was some part of my brain that was thinking like, is Mayfair going to walk? Oh, like there's a knife, it's bloody and everything. I was like, oh, she's going to search the room and she's going to find her ex in there, isn't she? She didn't. So. But all this kind of coincides with the fact is that Tasha confronts Reed because Reed still hasn't told her everything about what's going on. You know, Tasha is getting increasingly more and more suspicious of Mayfair, especially because Reed won't tell her everything. Because Reed is telling her to back down because he found out she was investigating into Tom, and it's just like. Reed is trying to look out for her, but she's pissed. Tasha's pissed because it's like, you won't tell me anything. You're telling me to back away, but you won't tell me why, what for. She's like, so essentially, I'm going to look into everything myself. She's like, because I respected Mayfair. Mayfair kind of brought me into all this, but she's like, I can't, do that anymore. So and Reed's kind of like, what are you going to do? She's going to basically saying, I'm going to find the truth. Which things aren't going to work out well for Tasha either, is because it's like Reed has been warned and now Mayfair has been warned. They might not be as kind to give a third warning to another person. They may just straight out just kill Tasha if she looks too deeply into this. I mean, it's kind of sad because Reed could easily just tell her the truth. I mean, eventually maybe he will, because it's as simple as saying like, yeah, I was looking into Tom's death, because she was like, oh, you're looking to it too, aren't you? What you find, but it's like, it just admit the fact is the reason why he broke up with Sarah is because of that. But it's like, I guess like in situations like this, I guess even admitting the fact is you're being threatened is kind of something you shouldn't do. It's like you shouldn't admit. I don't know. It just seems like out of anyone you should tell Tasha, especially because Tasha's going to be aiming at the Mayfair. It's not like Mayfair's necessarily a bad person. She just got, it's not like because, that guy that, kind of sicking Tasha on Mayfair, he's kind of got it in her head that, like, Mayfair's the one behind everything, that maybe he kind of essentially is getting her thinking that maybe she's connected to Tom dying, her ex dying, as well as, I forgot. He was the guy that was in prison. Basically, the day that Mayfair was there to visit him, Tom had already had it set up for him to get killed. But I don't know. I guess we'll just see what happens in the next episode, because I'm curious to find out, like, what will Mayfair do? The dead body there. Is she going to call the cops, or is she going to hide this? I don't know. Like, I feel like in a situation like that, she can't be there, be like, oh yeah, calling the cops. She's probably going to hide that body, probably to kind of cover her tracks. Like I said, Tasha's going to look into this, and that's just going to be problems in itself. And we also had, in this episode, we kind of had, multiple moments where we have, Kurt and Jane kind of bonding. Kind of brings up the fact is that him and Allie are no longer dating. Just because, because Allie thought there was something between him and Jane, which there obviously is. Too bad Kurt doesn't know about Oscar and Jane. But still, you can, no matter what, you can always see it in her eyes that there is a part of her that, even if she is with Oscar, there's still a part of her that deeply cares for Kurt, because he does so much for her. He spent so much of his life looking for her, and even now he's doing so much to protect her and look after her and everything. He's probably one of the only people out there that she's closest to. Because he kind of brings up the fact is that at one point he wanted, kind of at this point in life, because he was kind of like, that, to be a lot like his dad, but have like a whole bunch of children running around. But he's like, that's probably never going to happen now. And Jane's kind of like, why? He's like, with the job, with the way of life that they have, he's like, it's not, he's like, I won't be the father that I'd want to be, It's like, it's not saying that with this job I couldn't be a good father, but I wouldn't be the father that I'd want to be, like the best possible father I could be. But Jane's kind of like, oh, you make a good dad. And he's kind of, thanks. And we also had her and Oscar, because Oscar kind of did something interesting in this episode. He told Jane a little bit about himself, about how his mom was really into jazz, and because she died, it kind of drove him to kind of get more into jazz. And the fact is that Jane really didn't originally like jazz until they started getting until her and Oscar started getting closer, and then she started liking it because he knew how important it was to Oscar. Because she knew how important it was to Oscar, it became very important to her. So. But we also, because she wanted more time. She wanted to meet with the other members of the organization, because it's like she knows very little about them and wants to meet them. But, all he did was tell her to copy some files off some computers at the FBI. She just plugs it in and then pulls it out. The light turned green. So it's like, we don't know what files were on there. So she ended up following Oscar to his place, and we see her there at the very end of the episode. So that's going to cause some problems, especially when he goes off to meet other members, and then you have Jane there tagging along. That's probably going to raise some red flags, because initially Oscar wanted to back away from the situation in the last episode, remember, because he felt like he was getting too close to Jane. And if they find out about her tracking him back like that, they're probably going to look at it as like, Oscar's not qualified for his job anymore or something like that. I don't know. We'll just have to wait till next episode to see what happens. But that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.